Well, let me, since you guys, John keeps bringing up Chelsea. Let's talk about this first. This sparked a lot of
So
conversation
sad.
yesterday with Pochettino leaving with mutual consents. What do you guys make of that? Because honestly, we talked about this. Mateus knows and then we can make fun of it afterwards. That when we were playing Chelsea as the first game of the season, I mean, I remember I kept saying, "Hey, this is the best time to play him before they figure stuff out." And then they were kind of like a laughing stock for a long time, where we couldn't even beat him the first game. But then, we were like, "Oh, that was nothing to worry about anyway." I guess they were gonna suck, but you could tell overall. And I think in the next graphic that we're gonna look at that you actually shared. Well, let's do it right here. You could tell they were kind of figuring things out, and you can see in the second part of the season, Chelsea is fourth
Mm.
with points. So did Chelsea just blow it then, John, by getting rid of this guy? Because I really thought he was, if anybody, he was the man to kind of slowly establish things, and it feels like he was, and now it's down the drain.
Yes, I am 1000% against this firing because I don't know if I mentioned it. I like Pochettino. I feel like he's a good manager to bring in if you want to build a team. And Chelsea, with all their young guys, Jackson and Kunku, all those guys, they're young. They've still got some pieces that they've still got aspects of their game that they need to develop. And I think, looking back at Poch's body of work, obviously people make fun of the no trophies thing with Spurs, but look at what he's done with that team. He's made them, like, obviously, Tottenham syndrome, Spursy, and all that is what gets publicized by the media. But that Spurs team was a pretty difficult team to play against and beat for years, probably until they lost that Champions League final against us. That's when things started to unravel. But before that, they were a pretty respectable team. And that's, all credit to Poch, building that team up. Harry Kane, Son, Dele Alli, all those guys, they came in as uncut gems, and then they came out as diamonds. So I don't know what the Chelsea management is doing. Like, you give this guy time. Like, if you think about Klopp's first season with us, we were making good progress in the cups, but in the leagues, we weren't doing too good either, right? Like, they made the final of the League Cup, which we did as well during Klopp's first season. We made the Europa League final and lost that. They didn't. Okay, fine. But then, that second half of the season table, where they're third in a 19-game sample size, is pretty good viewing. So why? Right? Why? There is something going on there that's working. So why break it up?
My theory is, I don't know what you think, Gordo. Ryan says he had to deal with the pressure of playing high-paid players in the beginning of the season. He got things pretty figured out at the end of the season. They fired him. I take him as Liverpool manager, which I actually kind of agree to. But my thing is, I think it has a lot to do with what Ryan said earlier. I think the reason they're parting away is what Pochettino sees long term is different than what the club sees long term. And I think with what Pochettino sees, maybe some of the ridiculously overpaid players, he's like, no, this is just not the right one. And meanwhile, because they just bought these guys randomly and spent all this money, they're like, well, we spent all this money, we got to play him. And I feel like in the background that has to be the disagreement, because like John is saying, you just can't be looking at the performance and saying this is not going the right way. It's definitely going like in the right direction. As a Liverpool fan, I actually like seeing this. And as kind of like somebody who likes Pochettino, I kind of like seeing this because I feel like he came out of the circus and he can go to a proper club now. But what do you think? Gordo, like, why do you think this ended up being this way?
It has to be backroom stuff. I can see this being something where Poch wanted more control over resources in the beginning of the year. He wasn't giving it because they're like, hey, we already had these kind of players in mind, so we're going to go ahead and buy them. And he was sort of against it, and then it didn't work out. And then he turned it around in the second half and basically probably went back to him and said, all right, let's see what I can do with when I mold the team. Now I need more responsibility in the transfer market. I want more say. And it probably wasn't going that way. But to suggest that Chelsea has a long-term plan, I think is being very nice. I think the All-Star game for Todd Bowley is where his mind's at. North versus South All-Star game. So I don't think there's a long-term plan in Chelsea. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. One of the things we talked about, I potted last night too, and one of the things we talked about there was like, look at the teams that did well. Look at how big of the gap there was between Villa and Liverpool. And those top three teams, what did they have in common? They had longevity in the coaching position and the manager position. And look at Arteta's first season even, and how bad that was. There was Arsenal fans, some of my friends were calling for his head, and when that his second season didn't start very well, they were like, yeah, it's time to move on from him. He doesn't know what he's doing. And they gave him time, they stuck by him, they gave him the money, they gave him the players, and now look at his team. And it's just, with Chelsea, the carousel that they've been on, they needed to stay with the manager. And when you look at that, there's only one team that even comes close to them in terms of the difference between the first and the second half of the season, and that's Crystal Palace. And based on the results of the FA Cup, Chelsea could get Europa League from basically being in 11th all season.
Yeah.
So, I you'd have to argue that Poch should have been maybe the second half manager of the season in terms of like where they were and then what they could possibly achieve based on results this Saturday.
Matthew says they're players that are on 6-7 year contracts. Of course, they have a long-term plan. I think that was the issue. Like, we even talked about it then. When you sign people and you're on the hook for them for 6 or 7 years, they're going to have more power at the end. You have to play these guys now, regardless of what they do. And I think as a player, when you give, they're all professionals and stuff like that, but maybe they're not as professional once they know the next 7 years are secured and not playing for a contract 3 years down the road, or not knowing their future, or their minutes and stuff like that being on the line based on how they perform and how they practice and how they care themselves. Sergi says, can't compare. Who the hell is comparing Poch with Klopp?
I just compared the first seasons, but
because here's the difference. Like,
poor John. That's going to be another clip going out.
Right, I just compared the first season, bro. I never said he was Klopp.
But they blew their midfield up too, right? Like, that you're not supposed to do that. Like, how Chelsea's season went is how ours potentially could have gone.
Yes. We expected it to go, really, right?
Yes. You can't like destroy your middle, like basically the transition between your defense and offense, and bring in all new players that haven't played for the club before, that are young. That's what's supposed to happen. And for him to have gone through that and at the end of one season figured it out and potentially on the verge of European Cup, I think it's ridiculous that he was fired. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't.